Hi, everyone. This is Miranda Ward with the Valuable Voices podcast. I'm so excited for this. Andrea lives in the same town as me. We have not connected in a while, but a mutual friend recommended her. I thought it was our boys' baseball team, but she reminded me that we met through our girls' softball. So this was a while ago, and we've gone to churches together. And I just love. So I checked out her website. She has a book, so she'll tell you all about this. But we were talking before this, and it's so interesting to me that everybody kind of has their story, right? Or people are going through life. She's always got a smile on her face. She's always positive. But hey, again, we all have a story. You never know what people are going through. And I just love what you're doing. I'm so excited to hear more, Andrea. So thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks so much. It's my pleasure. It's nice to have a platform to kind of tell my story and see where I can connect with people.
Yeah, I love this. I'm so excited. You look beautiful. Again, we haven't connected in a while, so I feel like we should be having coffee, but maybe we'll do that later.
Yes, I love that.
But yeah, just dive in. You shared a little bit about your story, but I want you to share that for your listeners. So, why the book? Why now? You obviously have an amazing story, and I just want to get that out there. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I began writing quite a while ago, and it just kind of grew out of processing life. I was single for a long time. I didn't get married until I was 36. And as a single gal out of college, I'm like, well, what am I going to do with my life? So I kind of jumped in. I started working, but most of my time off of work was spent with urban teenagers. Our church had an outreach program. I lived on the north side of Chicago. I interfaced with urban teenagers of different races, different family backgrounds. It was really a diverse area, which I loved that. And so I kind of poured myself into that. It was almost like I was working to support my, volunteering habit. And through the course of all that and having, friendships and being involved in a church, life begins to bubble up with some of the unpleasant stuff. Mm-hmm. So just to hear the stories of some of the teens I was working with, there would be times when I would be buying someone shoes because, their mom ate or would go and spend the money on alcohol when they got their check that month. I had a family living in my home when the husband was kind of abusive. It was 3 girls and the mom and this teeny tiny apartment that I was living in. But I loved it. That's where I loved like relationship building and being able to start helping people kind of connect those dots of those rough times in life with the fact that God is still good and still available and present. So I kind of began writing. And as I got married, my husband and I didn't have the same passion for youth, but we still had the same passion for that relationship building and introducing people to Jesus, kind of like where they're at. So we started leading an Alpha course in the city. An Alpha course, just in case anybody doesn't know, it's a 10-week kind of Christian exploratory program where people come, we share a meal, and they get some teaching about like what the Bible says, some of the basics of Christianity, and then people can talk about how they feel about that, whether they hate it, whether they love it, wherever they're at. We've had people from all spectrums of life take an Alpha course. And it's just kind of an exciting way to help people connect those dots again. Yeah. But where I started writing was, as I was doing youth ministry and involved in church, things started happening. Like our pastor left his wife for an affair, and my small group started disintegrating because people started having affairs with each other. I'm like, well, wait a minute, we don't do that in church. What's going on? Wow. And so and that's when I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm like in my late 20s, and now I feel like an adult. This is what happens when adult life happens. Wow. So I began to process some of those through writing. I had gone to a conference, and to be quite honest, speaking of bad memory, like I remember nothing else from the conference whatsoever. But I came away from that conference with a half-sized 3-ring binder that said my prayer journal. And on the inside, there were different sections. You could do prayer, you could do petition, confession, all that, kind of the basics of what we're taught in prayer. But I would use that journal to begin writing like how I felt about things. And then I realized, gosh, if I were to write everything I felt, I don't have time for that. And so I began using shorter sentences, phrases, and that's kind of how my, writing developed. And that's sort of what kicked off what I would call, my modern day Psalms today.
Wow.
So that's kind of how it started. As far as like publishing now, because now I've got teenagers.
Yeah.
So from when I started to now, it's kind of a long timeline. I had first, when my husband and I first got married, like I say, we were still involved in the city and a church, but I was still in contact with some of the teens who now had grown up. I had my first son. We were, interfacing with people through the Alpha course and helping people along, connect some dots there. And one of the girls that I had mentored when she was a teenager, her name was Carol. She's probably one of the two girls that I became closest with. She wanted to be a teacher. She wanted to succeed. She wanted to kind of know God and kind of grapple with how that really fits into her life, coming from a broken home, but being the first to go off to college. So it was, and we became like sisters. So I remember she had a photography class her senior year, and she did her photo shoot like project on me.
Wow.
And I still have that to this day.
Wow.
So I'd had my first son. He was about 6 months old. It was December, and I got a phone call from someone who knew Carol and I, and told me that she had been in a car accident, and that she had not lived. She and her boyfriend at the time were driving home from Michigan for her mom's wedding, her second wedding, which was going to be on Christmas Eve, and they hit some black ice, and the car spun out of control, and it snapped her neck, and they both died instantly. At the same time, I had found out I was pregnant, but in that same week that I got the news about Carol, found out that my pregnancy was not viable. So, then it ended up on the same day that I had to go to the hospital for a procedure to get the baby out. That evening, I went to Carol's funeral.
Wow.
So you've got all these like emotions and all this stuff going on. And, it was hard. And I don't think I grieved my miscarriage till years later. I felt like I went through a decent process to grieve Carol. But a few years down the line, a couple of people were asking, well, you used to be writing. How come you're not writing anymore? And it was kind of a revelation to me because I almost hadn't realized it. It had come to my mind a couple of times like, oh, I should write, but I just couldn't.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized, maybe there was still something in my grieving process I hadn't dealt with yet.
Sure.
And so then to begin writing again took a while, slowly over time. So now my book is out.
Yay.
And what finally pushed me to pull it together and seek some advice, because I know a couple people in the industry, and really kind of get it going was, I having teenagers, one of which is a daughter. She's a freshman this year. I noticed that there are a lot of talented kids. And with this generation and with the complications of COVID and how that has hit kids differently than I expected. I think we watched our kids go through the normal stuff we did during COVID, kind of being isolated and separated. But until things kind of got back to normal this year, I don't think I realized how drastically it had hit them, because I kind of felt like I lost them a little bit. And only now that things are in a better rhythm do I feel like, oh, I see their personality coming back again. Some of the things that they love coming back again. And so I just noticed a kind of trend where things that kids are good at, they're not doing. Whether they perceive that other people don't accept that talent, or they're just something just happened during COVID where they're a lot more self-conscious than they used to be, or just the way this culture is going, because it's just a rough time in history.
Yeah.
I felt like for the sake of my daughter and setting an example, I needed to kind of pull this book together, and any insecurities I felt about that, which were many, because there's tons of books out there. I mean, it's a drop in the ocean, right? But to go out and do it and get it done and push it through, I needed to set that example for her before I can really like challenge her on some of the things I see in her life.
Wow.
So that's kind of how it's come about, and how I pulled it together at this time in my life and our family's life.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. Wow, wow, wow. Did you always have a passion for teenagers? I'm kind of curious why that was just your heart.
Yeah, it was interesting. I came out of college and I volunteered with some of these, urban kids, because that was the church I was going to.
Yeah.
And no, in fact, I was like, I am a white girl from the suburbs, way out of my league here. And I remember walking to youth group that night thinking, okay, I think I'm going to tell Tony, the youth leader at the time, I don't think this is a good fit for me. But I remember praying, God, if there's any reason you want me to stay, just show me.
Yeah.
So I walked in that night, and one of the girls in the group who had a little bit of an edge to her, I was just kind of talking to her. She was talking about how she worked at the mall, and I was like, oh, I should come visit you sometime. She's like, yeah. And then, kind of talk. And that moment was a lot more significant than I expected. I'm like, oh, I'll just go see her at the mall, whatever.
Yeah.
But that night she was telling everybody, oh, she's going to come see me at the mall. Wow. And everyone's like, what, really? So, that's where I learned about the value of investment. Volunteering is great. But my call was deeper, to be invested. So I showed up and I got to know her. I got to know her family. I got to know her friends, and God just paved that road for me.
Wow.
Even when I was ready to turn and run the other way.
Yeah, I love that. It's so inspiring. I mean, I think we all have so much in our heart, right? Like whether it's our calling or what we love to do or what brings us joy or how we want to impact others or influence others. I love that. And I love that you made your why really important. Why you wrote this book. It sounds like it was a lifelong journey, but for your daughter or for your kids or for teenagers, I just love that, to set an example. I mean, that's beautiful. So who's your book for? Tell us about the book.
Yeah, my book is for, I would say, probably people who are a little more creatively wired might be drawn to it first. Just because it's poetry, but my poetry is pretty simple and relatable. I read some poetry where I'm like, wow, they're a master of how they like put words together. And my poetry is not that. My poetry is definitely more simple, relatable, but hopefully vulnerable, and raw. And, it gives people the space to be like, oh, I think I felt that too. And if I felt that way, does God still exist? I've had those questions. And so, I kind of take some of those experiences, take some scripture after each psalm, and let people just kind of sit with it. Sit with what God says, let them think through their situations, and, maybe process a little bit of their own life themselves. It just gives people a platform and so it can be someone who's like deep in their faith, someone who's feeling disillusioned. It could be someone who's even just exploring Christianity and, picks this book up and says, well, let me see if, she helps me make any more sense of it or not.
Yeah. Awesome.
So
I love that. Again,
the audience.
So many people, like you being vulnerable and you opening up. I mean, that's where people relate, right? I feel like some of us are just putting on this, everything's good, and we're not opening up. And I feel like those are the people I relate to, is like, okay, I've felt that way before. I've felt sad, or I've lost somebody, or I've grieved. So I love that. And that's where it's like, well, what helped you? Okay. If that helped you, maybe that will help me. And that gives people hope
Mm-hmm,
in this
mm-hmm.
time. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, what have you learned? This is a huge process, right? Not everybody writes a book. So what have you learned about yourself, or how have you grown? I'd love to hear.
Um, well, I think I've come to appreciate some of the ironies of just life that probably we all experience, but things like, yes, I'm on the phone with the publisher talking about, the next step. Meanwhile, our veiled chameleon is like running up the curtains, and I'm got him on like speakerphone while I'm, saying, yes, yes, that sounds good, while I'm trying to pull this, lizard off my curtains. It's, I'm trying to get ready for, an interview somewhere, and my kittens are like biting the cord, so,
Right.
and it's stuff like, when do I write?
Yeah.
So before I think I started writing, I thought, oh, authors must like go to like a mountainside or a beachside and
Right.
just get all these great hours and time alone. And the truth is, I spend a lot of my time writing in my car.
Yeah.
My oldest son drives now, so I'm not taking him as many places, but my daughter doesn't drive. So
Yeah.
between, doctor appointments, or she does some martial arts, those kinds of things, when I'm waiting in the car for her,
Wow.
that's when I'm, on my laptop trying to get some stuff done, or a thought comes to me and I'm like, okay, let me do this now. So I think it's definitely not a glamorous writing life.
Yeah.
That's for sure. It's in between life as it happens.
I love
For
that.
sure.
Again, totally relatable, right? Busy mom, 2 teenagers. Yes, totally get it. So it's like, hey, you got a goal, go after it. Fit it in the time, the time you have. Well, I love that. Tell us where we can find you, your website, where to get the book. I'm so excited to get this in people's hands. I'm super excited for you and just your journey.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Well, this is what it looks like. It's probably backwards, not
Beautiful.
for you, but so Life in Psalm is available online.
Okay.
My publisher is Westbow Press, so you can find it at westbowpress.com. You can also find it on amazon.com. You can find it on barnesandnoble.com.
Okay.
So any of your online platforms. I will be doing some local, book launch kind of stuff here. Some of those talks are still in process, but I think Grams 318 is going to host one in December or January. I'll be able to sell my own inventory of the book for a little bit less than what you'd find it for online. But those are things that are to be determined, but in the works right now.
That's awesome. So Geneva, Illinois, December, right before Christmas. Great gift. I love that. I'm sure we'll see it on social media. Tell us about your website.
My website is www.lifeinpsalm.com. It should be live very soon. The publisher is working on this site for me. I had a previous site. It's the same domain name. So I'm not sure if some of my old stuff is still on there, but it'll be transformed and live quite soon.
Awesome.
And I'll be able to keep up a blog there, kind of keep people engaged, and looking forward to my next project, probably looking for input on my next project, and just being able to connect with anyone who needs some encouragement in their walk with God.
Awesome. Wow. Well, again, it's been a pleasure just to reconnect with you again, just to see your smile. You're just vibrant, and again, I just can't wait to see. I want to connect with you in person soon. So thank you so much for being on. You guys check her out, and just thanks for being here. God bless.
Yeah, thank you so much, Miranda. Bless you too.
Awesome. Take care. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks.